This podcast is brought to you by the shop at Artificery.com. Visit the shop at Artificery.com for Star Wars Destiny boosters, subscriptions, and singles, as well as other great curated tabletop games such as X-Wing, Dragonfire, and now Keyforge and Transformers CCG. Find out more at Artificery.com.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Artificery Cast. I'm your host, Hexen. With me, as always, is your Riffmaster Lassie.
Yo, what's up?
And Zero Hour.
Yo.
We need to find you a nickname, Zero Hour.
I'm Mr. Stern, the Riftmaster.
I am the boy that punches the heavens.
Man, I wish I picked up like one of those before they got me
Let's go full Keyforge on this.
You abandoning Destiny for Keyforge? Is that how it is?
No.
Hey man, we finally got regional dates, so that's a thing.
That's true.
After how much yelling?
A lot.
Definitely a lot. But yeah, man, Across the Galaxies has been in full swing, and there's just been we're already seeing some cool like decks pop out. Like,
some not so cool ones.
I mean, we'll get to those not so cool ones. But yeah, so how have you guys been enjoying Across the Galaxies? You guys get to try anything? Get to try any like limited at all with any of the new cards yet?
I got to run my Jin Cassian that I was talking about, and in a standard, not a limited. And it's super brutal. If you get it running early, it is brutal because you're just knocking off at least 3 cards a turn, and you really put them 1 o'clock.
I don't know if I'm the minority here, but I really don't like anything limited related to Destiny. I'm not super into the whole drafting thing, and people aren't really interested.
Man?
Yeah, even trilogies. Like people don't seem super interested in trilogies, and I mostly play on TTS, so it's like nobody wants to play trilogies on TTS, so I almost like completely ignore it. But I have played a few games, mostly like 3 or 4 games with various decks that you just kind of throw together and play for an hour or something like that. Lots of stuff with vehicles. Definitely trying to figure out the vehicles puzzle, I guess. And some blue character stuff that I've been trying out as well, with Qui-Gon especially.
Oh man, yeah. I've only really just gotten to try some just like limited formats, and vehicles definitely seem pretty strong. If you open even like a limited environment, like I did a sealed and I pulled, funnily enough, an Umbaran tank and a Shadowcaster.
Nice.
So it was just like, oh. And I only pulled like 2 mods, but it was like a turret and like the R2 reset. But it was still enough to just be like, man, these cards were brutal and limited, and I feel like they're going to be pretty brutal in standard, especially combined with a particular plot that has been gaining some popularity over the past couple days. How about we just dive into that, guys? Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, so we're just going to cover 3 of the 6 plots that we think have a lot of standard potential, and we're just going to lead off with a big one, and it's one that I personally love, and that is Armored Reinforcement. So what this plot does, for all those who don't know, it clocks in at 3 points, so it's already a pretty heavy cost, but it's probably the first 3-point plot that kind of sticks out in the realm of profitable connections in terms of value, and even more so in my opinion. And it's a simple red plot with the action: set this plot aside to search your deck or discard pile for a vehicle support and play it, decreasing its cost by 1. If you search your deck, shuffle it.
Yeah, this is really good. This is definitely my favorite plot of the bunch because it leads to a lot of deck building opportunities and definitely changes the dynamic of a vehicle's player and a deck, and like a lot of the things that you can do with it. Obviously 3 points is super costly and not at all easy to kind of fit into things, but vehicles is always kind of like played low to the ground in terms of their characters, so this has brought up a lot of interesting deck building opportunities, and I definitely think it's probably the most interesting plot, and I really like the design of it.
Yeah, it's super solid. I mean, getting a tutor whenever you want is great. And the fact that you can also get it out of your discard pile and the fact that it reduces the cost, there's no downside except it limits your character building. But again, you don't care as much about character building with vehicle decks.
It's like it limits character building, but at the same time, yeah, it doesn't really feel like it. Like we're already seeing a couple teams that have utilized this pretty effectively. I've predominantly been seeing it more in hero lineups because they got some fun new toys to go along with this plot personally, which I'm a little happy. Like villain already gets enough fun as it is. Let the heroes shine, but
Yeah, villain's kind of fine on that front.
but at the same time, it seems like it might even be a bit aggressive from like the hero decks we're already starting to see pop up. And I'm gonna bring up two of them. And I believe Lassie, you said you kind of had a thought on a villain variant that can utilize it.
Yeah, I think Heroes is definitely the kind of has the most options that you can work with, and there are a lot of varieties that you can use it with. But I definitely think that villains can reap the rewards from this plot as well.
But yeah, so without stalling too much into it, we're just gonna dive into one of the deck concepts, and this is one that I highlighted as a deck that I was excited to see from last week's show. And we even have a article put out of this particular lineup from our man Agent of Zion. So it's a very simple lineup of Elite Bigs, Elite Han 3, and the 4-cost starter Falcon. And
Yeah, we talked about this deck before and kind of all the shenanigans that it can do, rolling out all of its dice, resolving them with action cheating, and then like running away and telling your opponent to deal with all the damage they just took. I was definitely interested in the character combination that you kind of proposed to us, and definitely like the way that it functioned as this Finn Maz shell that did things a little bit less consistently, but with a lot more burst and a lot more potential. And I've messed around a little bit with that list, and it's definitely fun.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of the starter Falcon too, because I think it's just its action efficiency that it allows is it's really good, and especially when you pair it with Bigs now, it's super fast.
I mean, that's like the obvious combo, right? That's pretty much feels like Biggs' ship. And
Yeah,
what I'm liking about it is while, of course, he had like the Finn Maz deck, like Maz was always there as like a pure support and couldn't really deal damage herself off her dice. But like in this lineup, like like armored reinforcement here, it pretty much is just like a 5th character die. And that die in this lineup is pretty nasty when you consider that like your 5 dice can all output pretty decent damage.
yeah. I mean, generally, I feel like you're using that as your first action, probably more often than not.
Yeah, it feels
I don't
like.
necessarily know about. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't necessarily know about like first action. Like I definitely want to see what's going on with the battlefield, or not the battlefield, just the state of the game and like how your opponent is acting and everything like that. While I understand that like with this deck archetype, you're just looking to get out the Falcon and use it as a third character. With other vehicles archetypes that are using this plot, I feel like you need to try to use it a little bit more as a toolbox and like wait to see what your opponent's going to do, and if you have a different vehicle other than the Falcon that might assist you in beating your opponent, you need to like look towards getting that. But with this character list, obviously the idea is to get the Falcon out and to throw those mods on it and make it just an absolute beast.
For sure, and it's definitely, I think, probably the fastest one out of the decks, and it's capable of doing so because like it's just running away. It's pretty much just the Falcon is just doing like strafe runs on you throughout the entire game while it just like pieces out with hyperspace jump and retreat.
So the other deck that you're talking about, you mentioned was a little bit slower, a little bit more tuned to like playing the regular vehicles game as opposed to the action cheaty, I kill you and run away type.
Yes, this
deal.
one is actually, I think, potentially a little more brutal. and it's still hero, but it feels like the Bro TK deck, but in vehicles, which is a little scary thought. And the lineup for this one is what is it? Elite L3, 2 Rebel Engineers with, of course, the plot, and that deck's ship monster of choice is the Shadowcaster. And for those of you who don't know about the Shadowcaster, it has a 6 gun side.
Yep.
It's pretty gross. Granted, it is 6 for 3 resources,
like
but
basic.
the Shadowcaster has that sweet ability of reducing the resource sides on its die for every mod you have on it. So once you have 3 mods on it, all of its dice are pretty free. And with this lineup, your Rebel Engineers can find you the mods you need like really, really quick. And after that, you just kind of have to deal with this loaded out Shadowcaster that's abusing cards from like the older sets that we saw back in the heyday of Destiny that never really saw play, that people usually thought as a win more, which is like stuff like strategic planning, which now we're seeing. Now that mods are included, it is pretty much just a leadership with no downside effect at all. We have 33% chance focus sides on all of our character dice. So this deck is able to punch pretty hard and pretty brutally if you're not able to kind of stop it or find a way to just deal with the Shadowcaster itself.
My big apprehension with this deck is that it's really going all in on that one vehicle, right? Like you're throwing down all the mods that you can. You're like aggressively searching through your deck in order to find those. And I feel like if your opponent gets the opportunity to play out like an ATST or a rocket launcher or even Mauler or any of the like varied vehicle hate that we currently have available to us right now, you're gonna be really, really sad, and you're gonna have to go like play on the back foot whenever they start to threaten your one and only like powerhouse vehicle. So that's my huge anxiety about this particular deck. While I definitely think it punches super hard, I'd be very worried about just getting hard countered and completely shut down.
Yeah, I mean that's a worry, but I mean the Shadowcaster is also non-unique, so you can just do that to 2 of them. I mean it's
It is
pricey,
unique.
but
Yeah. Oh my
The
god, are you kidding?
Shadowcaster's
If you could have
unique.
2 of these out?
I mean, do you feel like this deck or this character suite makes I guess money technically isn't really the problem because you're just throwing mods onto this thing and they're relatively cheap. But like in playing this deck, have you consistently gotten out the Shadowcaster and put at least like 1 mod onto it and resolved it in the
Almost
first round?
always. It's because like, especially if you get your
that's
battlefield,
crazy.
like there's just no stopping getting this thing down. Because it's only a 4-cost ship, your armored reinforcement is already decreasing it by 1. And you're playing on Weapons Factory Alpha just to get another like just passive decrease. And you just need to, of course, just tutor it once, get the effect of your battlefield once, and you pretty much like rocket on from there. And like if you do that, that's just using your starting resources without having to use up any of your character dice. The Rebel Engineers have like 2 resource sides each on top of a double focus, so it's a fairly consistent die for what you need. You have logistics there, of course, to just kind of ramp out more money when you need it. Like, it's pretty silly. And of course, at the same time, you are also running L3, who most people are just kind of like, oh, do I really want to give the Shadowcaster another mod? Like, after I kill this character? Like, your elite character just becomes an upgrade for your ship. And you have, like, ways to manipulate that with, like, dangerous maneuvers to kind of shift damage and guarantee damage over to L3. And it's a pretty consistent deck because armor reinforcement in itself just provides you that consistency on top of the consistency of like looking at your top 4 cards with a Rebel Engineer and seeing if there's a mod there, adding it to your hand, putting the rest on the bottom, then like digging again.
I mean, you get the consistency from L3 also. Just
No, like
the focus
all your
sides
character
are
dice have
great.
like focus sides.
Yeah, it's insane.
So do you prefer this method then over like going for a wider and more traditional version of vehicles, even with the plot? Like I realize that like the engineer has the two resource sides and you're constantly throwing down those logistics, but again, like I'm really scared of like the too many eggs in one basket issue. Have either of you considered trying something like going back to Yoda just for economy, or looking for something that's a little bit wider, using like Lando, and even if you do include an engineer, that's not necessarily as bad as going completely all in on these mods on one single support. Have you guys tried that at all? Like, how do you feel about that sort of hero vehicles
The way
archetype?
I feel about it right now is that armored reinforcement is the plot you take if you want to do a mod vehicle deck. Whereas if you want to go like wider and low to the ground, like we've seen in previous decks, you don't really need that plot at all. Like there's still a lot of very effective 2-cost ships that like you can kind of spam the board out with. We see like there's a lot more draw. There's ways to like kind of dig into your deck. And there's like just having like the passive kind of cost reductions through like either Rally Aid or a tech team. Like personally, a shell that I would go back to is I think Drive-By can still work very well. And you can even like put armored support in Drive-By by like cutting down like the Ezra die and either going like 1-die Ezra or 1-die Anakin just to have that like yellow still on top of like Elite Yoda and the rookie pilot. Like you can kind of set up that deck as a
Yep.
toolbox. Like if we start seeing a heavy shift in the, I guess, this kind of crazy vehicle meta, and to see how strong they are, we're bound to see a lot of like vehicle hate come out. So I guess where I want to lead into is how do we feel about that? Do we think that these vehicles are getting a lot of stronger like supports? Because as we've seen like throughout the sets, like there's always been a card to like kind of help vehicles, but there's always been this aggro deck that's just been like kind of pushing them out, but they've always been pretty viable. And now it's kind of reached this like exploding point where everything is just kind of culminating together to just make these vehicle decks like hit harder, hit faster, kind of do what they need to do. And a lot of the vehicle hate feels silver bullety outside of like certain cards, like an ATST or a rocket launcher, of course. But how do we think this will affect decks that we're going to see coming forward?
Well, I mean, the Shadowcaster deck, the going all in on that is basically just a new aggro deck, right? Because you're getting that out early, you're loading it up, and instead of your characters hitting that hard, it's that. So I mean, yeah, you're going all in on it, but they still kind of have to deal with that die or dice.
I also just sort of like armored reinforcement as like a consistency factor. It lets you take a lot more one ofs in certain vehicle lists, and just like yank them out if you need them. It makes that opening hand a lot less awkward, considering like you could just lose off the first two draws if you don't get exactly what you need with the vehicle deck. And I definitely think the added consistency with armored reinforcements kind of emphasizes that vehicles is moving closer to a mid-range deck or even like an aggro deck rather than the kind of long-term late game deck that it has been in the past that kind of relies on the inevitability of like eventually these 92 supports that I have out are going to kill you, right? Whereas right now we've kind of gotten to the point where it's like I'm going to ramp out really quickly and mitigate your aggro and have my decent setup of like 3 to 4 to even 5 cost supports that are doing their job better than like this super wide variety that we had in the past, especially with heroes.
For sure. I mean, I personally love the plot. I think it's an amazing plot. I don't feel like I feel like it's costed appropriately, where it pretty much just functions as you take this plot, in most cases, because we've seen with character builds, it's either you take like, at least with elite characters, it's usually a 3-point difference. So it's like, do you want this character at elite, or do you want to try to like squeeze this plot in instead, which kind of acts as like a die card.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think it's probably my second favorite plot from this set.
So going towards like the villains area, because I think armored reinforcement is like maybe even like necessary for hero vehicles to excel, considering its sort of reliance on these modifications and the fact that I feel like hero vehicles have worse supports, or at least worse die sides on their supports than villains do. One of the things I was considering looking at is just taking the big Snoke vehicles chassis, taking out a Bazine die, so you'd be Bazine, Stormtrooper, Elite Snoke, and throwing in armored reinforcement, and just exchanging those 3 points for the plot instead of her die. I would envision that becoming kind of like a toolkit. Like you're using armored reinforcement to look at your opponent's side of the battlefield and say, okay, this is what you have, and this is what I need to pull out of my deck in order to help deal with you in the opening rounds. Do you think that that would be a worthwhile sacrifice, or is that extra Bazine die too good to give up?
I personally think it's worth it because the Bazine die has kind of a time limit on when it's really good, and those 3 points can potentially get you something that you're probably never going to lose for the whole game, and that die side's always going to be good.
Yeah, it just kind of hampers you a little bit because, well, at the same time, yeah, it'd be really cool for that to just sacrifice that die side. Like, you still kind of are more hampering yourself and trying to find that resource that you need. Now, only from 2 character dice with Snoke that are far more susceptible to control. So it's kind of like a give and take. But like once you get set up and kind of get going, I could see like a villain toolbox kind of like get out of hand. I know Snoke's like the ultimate like kind of villain support character, but when you're sacrificing a character die, like I wonder if it'd be better to kind of go with like a 1 die Snoke and armored reinforcement so you can kind of get more character dice for you to Snoke off of.
Snoke is usually like the hardest to kill there. Like my issue is that like it's very difficult for me to get out of the idea of using Snoke and Yoda because they're such big economy contributors. Like it's so good to just take 1 damage and take those 2 extra resources off of one of your character dice. In the same vein with Yoda, like I have a really hard time moving away from Yoda because he just has such great economy, and obviously we're kind of moving away from that necessity as we get Anakin. We get the Rebel Engineers. L3 can focus stuff, but like I'm still like it's really hard to move away from that economy efficiency, and one of my biggest questions coming into the set is whether or not Yoda and Snoke will still be the big baddies of character building and deck building because they are so efficient in that. And while I think Heroes maybe has a better chance, I'm apprehensive about whether or not Villains has gotten something to top Snoke's just raw efficiency.
It's a good question. I mean, Snoke's he's so hard to not play for those points when you need it. Because even if he's not doing damage, he's basically doing the damage, or getting you resources, or getting you shields, or disrupt. I mean, he's just him and Yoda. I agree with you. They're streets ahead of everybody else.
Oh yeah.
Yes. No, I can see that. I'm just like kind of happy. Like I know the temptation's always there because they've always just been like proven characters in the past. And like they just bring so much to a team, but it's really cool to see that we're getting these like really competitive options to be like, I don't always need to like consider having this, because we're already seeing like these 2 decks are already very effective, and they're not running blue. Like that's already like a huge selling point for me. Was that in the past I always felt like I had to be locked into blue to kind of win a game.
Yeah, I mean I agree. It's nice. I like that we're seeing other combinations. It still feels really hard to get away from them. if you're playing blue.
I think it's easier in Heroes. I mean, L3, Anakin, and Rebel Engineer all sort of imitate what Yoda does on his own. And it's not like, other than events, I guess, it's not like, and Force Legion, obviously, it's not like Blue Heroes is like rife with supports or like support.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's easier in Heroes, but I would worry that it's not so easy if you're trying to do villain vehicles.
Yeah. No, I think Villain Vehicles has its own home. And I think like the support is more built around like for things that like heroes can abuse in their decks. Or this plot, I should say. But I definitely feel like we've definitely spent enough time on armored reinforcement. Like we're clearly all like super excited about this plot, about what it can bring to the table. Like literally just bring whatever you want to the table. But while this plot is powerful and very strong, we feel the need to kind of talk about a dark horse that's also been popping up in the Destiny community recently. And part of that enabulation is this next plot we're going to talk about, which is Double Down. And for those of you who don't know, Double Down is just a 2-cost yellow plot that you can include up to 1 additional copy of 2 different cards. So you could have like a 3-of set of like 2 cards I particularly like. And while this plot is fun and all, and can do a lot of things, it's also kind of busting the game in Hero. And it's not just the plot, it's also like the new Leia, enabling us to bring like villain cards. And we're sad to say that the 1-turn kill deck has reared back its ugly head. And on top of that, there is also the possibility of a 1-turn mill deck.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is unfortunate to say the very least. A Double Down as a plot, I think, is super boring. Like, I think adding an extra couple of cards to your deck, even if they're really good cards, is just not very exciting for 2 points. It is okay if there comes like a really sick character combination that does something like that. It's fine, but it's not like anything necessarily broken on its own. But one of the OTK decks that we're talking about here is a deck that essentially uses Double Down, 5 X-Wings, and 3 Long Cons, and just has the same like OTK chassis that just draws their entire deck and plays all their cards at once and just kind of plays solitaire by itself while you sit there and have to watch. And I don't know that this was a huge issue in the Way of the Force meta, but it was definitely something that we were keeping an eye on. And I think the only reason it didn't gain popularity was because it feels awful to play and nobody wants to play against it. And you become that guy. Nothing was done errata-wise about the deck, but essentially it's very not fun to play against. It revolves around getting all the X-Wings out and just, battering people and profiting and doing nothing other than playing with yourself. And while it's not necessarily as much of a 1-turn kill, it definitely mimics that format without doing the launch bay shenanigans.
Yeah. Part of like what's breaking this though isn't even the fact that it's like, oh, I get a 5th X-Wing. It's the 3rd copy of Long Con.
Yeah.
Because, as we know, this was a cool card we all saw way back in the day. We're like, oh my god, if I get this set up like one time, I get like 3 resources for free. Well, now we're looking at 6 resources for free. And even more in the 1-turn mill shell, which, if you thought like, facing down a board of X-Wings would be like your worst nightmare, just imagine not being able to interact with your opponent at all while they mill you in one entire turn without the need of any dice cards.
It's super not fun.
Just let that sink in. No dice cards. And they just mill you out.
And for the sake of the audience, like, how does this this one turn mill deck
So the
go
basics
about
of it
ruining your day?
is that essentially the lineup is like 1 die Leia, 1 die Ezra, I think a Gungan warrior, and double down. And we're talking about blue Ezra, of course, just so you could be in rainbow. And so you're essentially just getting your 3 copies of Long Con, and on top of that, you have Leia, who gives you access to the really fun villain card Buyout, as well as Deja Vu. So, for those of you who've never experienced the original like 1-turn kill shell, essentially what that shell did was just draw out like its entire deck. Like it just kept drawing cards and recurring cards back to draw more cards. And now what we're seeing is that you can pretty much like rebel back and cheat back your long cons, and then like kind of amass like a critical mass of money to the point where you just get enough to just buy them out in 1 turn, because buyout doesn't have a cap. You just need the resources to mill them out. And then like you're just thinking, oh, but you know, like what about the hand? Well, it could hit your hand too with lying in wait. It's pretty much just this critical mass of all the money and then buying you out and then just finishing off your hand.
And I think that the buyout OTK is kind of like a pretty easy fix. I think the community has been asking for buyout to be capped in some way, shape, or form since the card was released. And Thrankar was a big anxiety for a lot of people in the metagame. But the X-Wing version is a little bit different. Like, it exists mostly because we have so many cards and so much card draw, and there are a lot of opportunities to just draw your whole deck for no reason whatsoever. And I think the fix to that is a little bit more nebulous. I definitely think that you can do things about this deck and like hamper it from doing what it wants to do. But whereas the launch bay version was sort of all in on this idea of, you know, I have to kill you on 1 turn, otherwise it just kind of doesn't really work. The X-Wing version can kind of still just beat you by inevitability if it has enough X-Wings out and is rolling them out consistently, and can just kind of outpace you even if it doesn't perfectly pull off the combo that it's trying to create.
And I would just like to note that like while this unfortunate like nightmare of a deck does exist, it doesn't survive in Trilogy. It won't survive in rotation. It's just something we're just going to have to deal with right now in the set, which is a pretty unfortunate like circumstance in my opinion, because this is like, if we don't get like a rules update soon, hopefully that, you know, like the people behind this game have already spotted this and are like working towards like fixing this. Like hopefully we get a rules update, hopefully we get some erratas on certain cards, because there's a lot of interactions with the older set, because the original set was pretty much like a test bed set. Like Destiny was a new game, it's cool, it's fun, exciting, it's like, yeah, sweet. But then of course, as we see the like down the line, unforeseeable, we'll see on like things that can just break easily with certain card interactions here. Like we've seen it before, and I think I can safely say, at least like when it comes to Trilogy, like that set, like in its like just shell, is fairly balanced for the most part. Like there isn't anything like that's obscene. But yeah, we're just in a world right now where we have like all the cards and we're just abusing all the interactions we can while we can.
I definitely think a more aggressive rotation would definitely help the health of the game, but I also think like this current state of affairs with across the galaxy and how many cards we have and these sort of potentially problem decks. Like, I'm not even necessarily saying that either of these OTK decks are going to be like predominant meta considerations, or that people are going to be playing them at tournaments. It might turn out to be that way. It might be that oppressive, but the issue is that it is a negative playing experience, and that's a term that you hear a lot around the community. But basically, like, even if it's not good, it creates, similar to the Hyperloop, it creates a situation that is just not fun to play against and isn't healthy for the community. And I think if this gets large enough, these two combos, it should serve as like a testing period to see like if FFG can responsibly respond to issues in their game. Because I think one of the big criticisms that we've had of FFG now and in the past is that they haven't been really quick on the uptake, and the meta has gotten stale or almost sometimes untenable in the case of like Kylo FN. And I think this needs to. FFG would go a long way if they quickly took care of the issue, and would inspire a lot of confidence in the community, I think.
I think the quick fix for decks like this is to just have a cap on stuff like buyout. And I think, especially in this set, we've seen that these kind of abilities have those caps. So, you can do X amount of damage for however many resources you have, up to 3. Or, everything's kind of got a limit now. And I think, at the time when buyout was around, you weren't snoking things to get 5 resources in action. So buyout wasn't quite as scary.
You had Thrawn.
It was pretty scary. Right. Yeah. But it didn't make it made, it made money if you got the right stuff. It didn't make Snoke money. So, I mean, it's a problem with rotation, and I think once this rotates, it won't be. But I think it would be a quick fix. There's probably more fixes that need to happen, but I think that would be a easy one to do.
And of course, we're all hoping that it gets responded to quickly enough, especially since regionals are right around the corner. This is going to be a big turning point. Regionals is like our big event of the year that we look forward to. And we just hope that we at least have somewhat healthy metagame to look forward to, and not have to encounter these style of decks.
Yep, agreed. I'm hoping things are going to gradually get better as FFG kind of refines their R&D process, I guess. And I am just filled with excitement for Across the Galaxy, because new sets are always fun.
I've been having a blast with this set so far too.
Yeah.
So
blocking sets out of my mind, I've definitely been having a blast with it as well. It's fresh, it's new. There's a lot of interesting new mechanics to work with. It's definitely a lot of fun.
Drafting Vader's Fist is hilarious.
But we are running a little long here.
Getting to roll Vader's Fist 3 times.
Longer than normal. And, so we definitely hope you guys enjoyed this show. Next week, we'll be sure to cover the rest of the plots that exist in the set, and we think those plots are a lot more fun. We just wanted to get these things out to you guys now and just be aware of it, as well as just what we feel are probably the 2 of the more competitive plots. And of course, you can all find us at artificery.com. We host articles. We're finally getting back into the swing of things with the new set. We're working on videos. Be sure to look forward to way more content being produced out over the coming months. Join us.
We also have tournaments and stuff. We're doing the league presently that just, as of recording, that went to the top 16 cut, giving out cash prizes and stuff like that, all kinds of cool stuff. So definitely check out our Discord and make sure you give us a holler, hop into some of the tournaments that we're doing on the weekends, and join, or at least keep an eye out for the next season of the league.
And
so
we are also doing
prizes.
It's this Saturday, right? We have a tournament this Saturday for standard play for Across the Galaxies, so we'll more than likely be streaming that. Of course, we want you all to join and sign up. We have all that info on our Discord. Again, you can find the link to that Discord through our website at artificery.com. And yeah, we just hope to see you guys all there. We're excited to see the turnout for this tournament. It's going to be like the first tournament for across the galaxies. And it should definitely just be a great time.
It's the most fun time for a meta.
And of course, with that, this is Hexen with the Artificery crew, and we're signing out.
Looking to get the leg up at your next Star Wars Destiny event? Join the Artificery Patreon and get early access to our strategy and deck tech articles, exclusive Discord chat channels, training and playtesting with the Artificery crew, and unique gifts like tokens and playmats that take your Star Wars Destiny experience to the next level. Join the Artificery Patreon at patreon.com/the Artificery crew.